So what constitutes an important book and how books came to be gathered together in these particular lists and how these lists are different is of importance to us because it frames the way we think and it frames the way we anticipate information, how we're going to file information. The first thing we have to understand is that these canons are not God-given. They're not derived from any particular authority other than human authority. Abraham did not wake up in the morning and say, Sarah, pass me the Bible. And the title of a few books called The Bible Within the Bible, the Old Testament and the Old Testament. People start asking, so what exactly constituted Scripture to people about whom we read in Scripture? It's quite clear, for example, that the Hebrew Bible, the Hebrew Bible, what's sometimes called the Tanakh, was Scripture to the early church. But was it? So that's the interesting question. But was it? Was it what we call, or was what I have translated over here, the Jewish Study Bible published by Oxford, was that in Greek translation or in Hebrew and Aramaic accessible to people of the early church? Well, not necessarily, because some of the early church fathers don't know the book of Esther. They've heard about it, they don't know what it is. The book of Esther wasn't found among the Qumran scrolls. It's the only book of the Bible that was not found at the Qumran scrolls. But that doesn't mean that the people at the Dead Sea community had the whole Bible. They had all of the books in the Bible that we have except Esther, but they had a lot of other books that we don't have because they disappeared. They were buried in caves. They've been written by that community for their own community. And they have something, therefore, important to teach us. That which constitutes Scripture for a community happen to be those books that the community esteems. If you don't like a book, then you're not necessarily going to use it. I'll give you another example that's rather important. There was about 25 years ago, there was a conference in Amsterdam on canonization and decanonization. How books become esteemed and get on this list, this canon of books that we should be considering when we're thinking about religion, and how do books suddenly disappear from that list. Day one goes by, very interesting. Day two goes by. Day three, we are at a meeting, and a new translation of the Bible into Dutch came out without the book of Revelations. Because to this day, and I didn't understand the politics, because when people saw what had just been printed and was being distributed at the conference, the argument switched from English to Dutch, and I didn't follow. But people were yelling and gesturing it, not like this, and yelling at each other, because the question was, as Christians, does the book of Revelation belong in Scripture? And obviously, from the loudness of the discussion, there were those that said no, and there were those that said yes. So a book that was accepted broadly within the church around, I guess, about the 10th century, was still debated in the 20th century. So all of this should give us an idea that it's not hard and fast. There's a social component that has to be taken into consideration.